Hello everyone. Today we will be discussing the summary of Chapter 3 Consumers Constraint Choice. We have following important topics: preferences, utility, budget constraints, constraint customer choice, behavioral economics. So let's discuss. Economists use a theory of to predict consumers' responses to indifference maps summarize consumer preferences, and an indifference curve consists of all bundles of goods that give the consumer a particular level of utility. Completeness, transitivity, and more is better are three properties of consumer preferences assumed by economists based on observations of consumer behavior. Property. Indifference curves that are further from the origin provide more pleasure to. Indifference curve cannot intersect or cross each other. Every bundle lies on an indifference curve. Indifference curves cannot be thick. Indifference curves slope downward. After that we have utility. Utility is a numerical representation of the relative rankings of bundles of goods. Utility is an ordinal measure, meaning that it allows us to compare the utility a consumer gets from two bundles of goods, but not by how much more they prefer one bundle over the other. The utility function is unique only up to a positive monotonic transformation. Marginal utility is the extra utility a consumer gets from consuming one more unit of a good while holding the consumption of all other goods constant. The marginal rate of substitution (MRS) is the rate at which a consumer is willing to substitute one good for another. The MRS depends on the relative amount of marginal utility the consumer gets from each of the two goods. Budget constraints. Consumers' ability to purchase goods is limited by their incomes. Higher incomes and lower prices of goods lead to better consumer welfare. The rate of exchange between two goods, known as the marginal rate of transformation (MRT). It is dependent on the relative prices of the good. Constraint customer choice. However, the consumers don't buy some of all possible goods, so their optimal bundles are corner solutions. At a corner, the last dollar spent on a good that is actually gives a consumer more extra utility than would a dollar's worth of a good the consumer choose not to buy. Lastly, we have behavioral economics. Economists are modifying the rational economic model using insights from psychology and empirical research on human cognition and emotional biases. Adults tend to make transitive choices while children are less likely to do so, especially when novelty is involved. Some people argue that children's ability to make economic choices should be limited. Consumers exhibit an endowment effect where the value of a more than the same good if they are considering buying it. Consumers who exhibit the endowment effect are less sensitive to price changes and less likely to trade goods. Many consumers fail to pay attention to sales tax unless they are included in product's final price and thus ignore them when making purchasing decisions.